Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, cooperators, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to this National Farmers Union webinar as we celebrate October Co-op Month, Cooperative Education, How Co-ops Engage with Principle 5. My name is Kathy Stotz, and I work as a cooperative educator for a variety of organizations. I'll share a little bit about my background in a moment, but we want to welcome you to this webinar and let you know that our panelists tonight are joining from all over. I happen to be at this moment in Marrakesh, Morocco. I'm living in Casablanca with my husband right now, who's teaching in an international school. Lisa, our behind the scenes National Farmers Union staff person, is in Washington, D.C. Megan is in Georgia, and Hazel May is in Hawaii on Kauai. So we're very pleased to have a wide range of representation across the world for this topic tonight, which touches all of us around the world in lots of different ways in the cooperative space. So we're really glad to have all of you here. And want to also welcome Nate Moore. I just saw him join as well. We're really glad to have Nate with us. And Nate, I presume, is in Minnesota, I believe, unless something's changed. And that's another great cooperative kind of eco center. And I'm so pleased to be from the upper Midwest, where we have such a great array of cooperatives. And so we have a great evening planned, well, evening for me in Morocco, a great program planned for you to take a look during October Co-op Month at this Principle 5, and we've got an excellent lineup of folks here to share their experiences with this principle and for you. So just quickly, I'll introduce myself a little bit, and then each of our panelists tonight is actually going to share a little bit about their cooperative story as their as part of their chat. So I'll just give a little bit of background on me and my role today, and then just briefly give you the sense of who's on the panel today, and then we'll start with Hazel May to share after a little bit of introductory information from me, to share a little bit more about the great examples of Principle 5 in action in our cooperatives and credit unions. So as I said, I'm Kathy Stotz. For about 30 years, I worked for Wisconsin Farmers Union, a family farm advocacy organization, and the Wisconsin chapter of the National Farmers Union. I grew up in the Farmers Union camp program, started to participate in day classes and summer camps when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and then staffed all but one of my college summers for the cooperative summer camp program of Farmers Union, and then stepped into my role as education director in Wisconsin just after I graduated college. I stayed there until just the last couple of years, where I shifted to wearing a variety of cooperative education hats so that I could join my husband as we lived abroad because he's teaching abroad. So my organizational connections are, of course, National Farmers Union, where I'm thrilled to be a co-coordinator of the National Farmers Union's College Conference on Cooperatives, a program that brings together usually 60 to 80 college students from around the country to learn cooperative basics and get career connections and networking opportunities. That's coming up in February. If you're interested, check out the NFU website or look up College Conference on Cooperatives. I also do some work for the Cooperative Development Foundation, where I help to co-facilitate the Cooperative Leaders and Scholars cohort that just finished a great week in DC as a part of NCBA CLUSA's national event, the Co-op Impact Conference. I also do some outreach work for the International Center for Cooperative Management at St. Mary's University in Halifax. Many of you might be aware with the excellent programs that are offered there, everything from hour-long webinars and day-long executive education courses to cooperative certificates, diplomas, and masters to aid those who are in the cooperative business space to really dig into the kinds of business aspects of cooperatives that frankly aren't often addressed in business schools and traditional business education. Finally, I serve on the board and do some project work for the Ralph K. Morris Foundation. Ralph Morris was a cooperative attorney in the Twin Cities, and the programs supported by his foundation run the gamut of all kinds of ways of engaging, particularly young people, in advancing their cooperative careers. So I'm just going to quickly draw your attention to the panelists tonight before I do a little bit of background on Principle 5. So we have today from Kauai Federal Credit Union, Hazel May Overturf, who serves as program director, Megan McCoy-No, brand storyteller with Pioneer Utility Resources, and Nate Moore, retail sales manager with REI Co-op. And they're, as I said, going to share a little bit more about their backgrounds as a part of their presentations. And if anyone is hearing a little bit of background noise, I'm not sure if it's audible on the recording, but as I mentioned earlier, I am in Marrakesh and the call to prayer is beginning. So if you hear a little background noise, that's what's happening here in Morocco. So let's take a look now at these principles which form the framework for our conversation tonight. The International Cooperative Association has these principles that have really formed the framework for how cooperatives think of themselves, how they differentiate themselves. If those of you know kind of the early history of cooperatives and the Rochdale cooperative pioneers in Rochdale, England, they had their own around things like cash trading, equal weights and measures, continuous expansion, but also education. That was actually a pretty critical aspect of their cooperative endeavors. The early co-op store on Toad Lane in Rochdale, England, had on the top floor a reading room where they got subscriptions to the newspapers of the time and actually taught their members to read if they weren't already able to, in order for them to learn and grow as people, as workers, and as members of the cooperative. So that education component is very deeply tied, even in our modern cooperative principles that you see today. There are 7. You see them on the slides. I've highlighted education, training, and information. That's the one that will be the focus for tonight. But I'll note that there is a global review of the cooperative identity. And one thing that's being looked at is the possibility of expanding the cooperative principles to include some additional attributes. And one of those is diversity, equity, inclusion. Many folks in the credit union movement have already adopted that. And so if you're not already familiar with that work, you may hear more about that in the upcoming year or so, because there's a lot of work right now looking at how our principles might be adapted again, as they have been a number of times over these many years that the ICA has been advocating and promoting them. So let's take a look now at our featured principle 5, education, training, and information. Now, the International Cooperative Association provides a little bit of background for each of the principles, a little bit more narrative to help us understand them. And so the ICA principles include, for this particular principle 5, that co-ops provide education and training for their members, elected representatives, managers, and employees, so that they can contribute effectively to the development of their cooperatives. They inform the general public. Now, here's one of my favorite parts, particularly young people, because that's the space that I worked in for 3 decades, and opinion leaders about the nature and benefits of cooperation. Now, that's fairly broad, right? It all sounds pretty good, seems pretty sensible. It's like, yeah, okay, we can do that. But what do we really mean when we say education? How do we consider the differentiation of those 3 words? Do we sort of lump them all together as a way of just saying the same thing in 3 different ways? Or do we really think about what each of them means? And I will challenge us all, before we hear the different examples tonight from our folks on the panel, to maybe look at this principle a little bit more deeply and see what we might extract here. Let's take first a quick look at how the ICA sort of stretches out this notion of these 3 different words. They actually, in their guidance notes on the cooperative principles, give us a little bit more information here. And they talk about information being a duty to make sure others know about co-ops, the general public, that they kind of understand basically what a co-op is, that this knowledge isn't just supposed to be, marketing or propaganda, but that it's really to kind of have an appreciation for what a co-op is and the benefits that it brings, right? And the ICA, makes a little note here to say, well, maybe not enough co-ops really take this responsibility seriously. Or if they do, maybe they, and this would be my editorializing on this now, maybe they think about the information that they're providing being relevant to their industry, right? So, we should educate farmers about, taking good advantage of the market, or understanding how to hedge, or, appreciating what the newest technology is in agriculture. All of those things are important for farmers to know, and there's arguably a role for co-ops to help provide that information. But if it stops there and doesn't go beyond and into, and I'm just using ag as an example because it's where I grew up and the one I'm most familiar with. But I think we see examples of this throughout the cooperative space, that we kind of think, we sort of narrow our view to information or education about our sector and forget that there's this bigger picture of the cooperative business model and of all of the other cooperatives out there that are in it, including credit unions, that are worthy of some mention and of some ambassadorialship, if you will. Okay, but so that's what the ICA has to say about that word information. Let's take a look now at training. Now, the ICA says this is about developing practical skills. Okay, that's true. That's different from providing information, right? That employees and members need to know, what does it mean to run this business? How do we do it efficiently, ethically? How do we truly have democratic control? How do we as staff enable that? And how as members do we fully embody that, right? How do we do it responsibly, transparently, right? How do we run the business? And how do we engage as members in that, whether that's board governance or like understanding how to participate really fully in an annual meeting, right? That's something different, something a bit more hands-on than just sort of information, right? Strictly speaking. When it comes to education, here's how the ICA differentiates. It's about understanding, right? It's about knowing how to apply perhaps the information or skills that we've learned. An interesting note in the second sentence, it's about the wider education offered to members for their social development. That's a much bigger idea, right, than just, as in my ag example, like what's the best way to, really lasso the market and make it work best for you and your cooperative membership, right? Cooperative education, and I love this next line, involves engaging the minds, right? So they really comprehend what the co-op is, its action, its thought, and its social impact, right? So that's a little bit of a deeper dive. Now, that's what the ICA guidance notes say. I have an additional layer that I'd like to add to this before we move on to our examples from our speakers. And it was inspired by a talk I heard given at an ACE Institute, that's the Association of Cooperative Educators. They have an annual institute where we share best practices and new ideas and learn about research happening in cooperatives and how those of us, working within cooperatives as practitioners might apply those things. The researchers are learning from the practitioners what kinds of questions they might take back to their research efforts. Is a really great community. And in that community, someone named Andre Martin, who was at the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, brought to our attention at a presentation a number of years ago, a closer look at the roots of the word education. And this is actually something that's in the general education literature as well, that was explored in a paper in 1984. The last name of the author was Cook. I'm forgetting his first name, but he drew out, and Andre Martin then extended this notion to the idea of cooperatives, cooperative education, drew out that the word education in the original Latin really is two words. There are actually two different words that are used. Educare is, the sense is to train or mold, but educere or sere, I forget, the Latin scholars in the crowd can correct my pronunciation, is a different sense, and it meant to lead out, right? And we see this in examples of education generally, right? And I would argue we might even see it in examples of parenting, right? If we think about it closest to home. When are the times when we're like trying to train or mold, right, an individual, whether that's a child or a student? And when are the times that we are engaging them to make their own discoveries, right, to lead them out into some kind of transformational understanding or sort of self-designed kind of experience, right? Now, what's interesting is that in English, we have just the one word, education, that encapsulates both of those original ideas in Latin, and we don't really differentiate, right? But I think we have the opportunity to do so, especially when we think about cooperatives. So here's another way now of looking at these three words, right? And it just distills it a little bit and brings in the ICA piece and combines it with this educare, educere notion. So, right, information is the what? Facts, statistics, knowing that there are principles and knowing what they are. How do we define it? What are sort of, the basic differentiations between IOCs and cooperatives and investor-owned cooperatives and investor-owned corporations and cooperative corporations, right? And I would argue this falls under sort of training or molding, right? It's data transfer, right? Here's something you should know. Now it's in your brain, and you have it, right? It's the what. Training, fairly self-explanatory, right? But gets to the how, right? Member participation, board governance, staff understanding and awareness of legal and accounting, good communications skills for both, comms staff and maybe member services folks, like knowing the how. It has pieces, right, of the transformation of possibilities of education, but might still be, for all intents and purposes, in the training or molding category. But then we get to this word of education, right? And the why. And this, I would argue, is that notion of transformation, right? Of changing hearts and minds, really understanding what is it that we're trying to do here beyond maybe just getting a better price as farmers, right? Or purchasing affordable groceries or utilities or financial services or housing or whatever, right? Ice axes, right? So what is it that is sort of a whole that's bigger than the sum of the parts here, right? What are we really doing when we bring people together to create systems that are more democratically just, more economically just, right? That have impact for them personally as individuals, but also impact the business but then the larger community beyond. This is the leading out. This is the space where we're really taking what cooperatives stand for writ large and thinking about how they, frankly, might change other things in our society. There are all kinds of examples of this, right? Farmers who joined the co-op board got good training on what it meant to, serve on or lead even a board, and then thought, maybe I should run for the town board. Maybe I should run for my faith-based organization board. Maybe I should run for the state legislature. That they found some scaffolding, some support in that cooperative space that then actually enabled them to be better leaders in the larger civil space, right? We hear about this in the civil rights movement, that many of our civil rights leaders, we don't really know their origin stories, and many of them, Jessica Gordon-Emhard writes about this in her book, Collective Courage, many of them got their start in cooperative organizing, or they were in cooperative study groups, and they were exploring these ideas of cooperatives as a way for those communities to come together to better themselves by, working together. And then they actually just extended those ideas and those organizing skills into the into the civil rights space. So those are really fascinating stories. And so I think that when we are looking at education in our cooperatives and credit unions, do we differentiate? When we think about these three words, when we are delivering, programs or initiatives in the education realm, which of these three are we trying to do? And perhaps we don't think about the other side as often as we should. What is our audience expecting to receive, right? Because if you are trying to transform that grocery shopper who's like, I just need to get dinner on the table tonight for my family, right? And you're kind of coming at them with a social justice mission, and they're like, I just need to get some affordable rotisserie chicken and get out the door, right? You may have a disconnect, right? Conversely, someone may show up really excited to get involved in the cooperative and just be handed sort of a dry leaflet of facts, figures, and statistics, right? So that disconnect can happen in both directions. What I've invited our panelists to do tonight is to, number one, share a little bit about their cooperative story, their background, what brought them to their present roles, and why they're sort of, interested and passionate in this cooperative education space. And then to share some examples of cooperative education, either in their co-op or in the circles that they function in cooperatively. And when possible, to kind of highlight, which of these three those activities fit under, and I invited them to even share some times where it didn't work, right? Where maybe there was that disconnect because they were trying to do one thing and the audience was only really prepared for the other or wanting the other, something other. And then to give us all some, I hope, inspirational motivation to think about how we move forward in education in our co-ops, and how we think about maybe even some things to do for co-op month in the future, since it's co-op month right now. So with that, I'm going to take a look at some examples through our speakers. We're going to start with Hazel May and transition directly from Hazel May to Megan and from Megan to Nate. And so I will go on mute, and Hazel May, I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a wonderful overview of a way for us to frame like kind of how and what we're going to be sharing with you all today. And I'm just so honored and like feel so privileged to be a part of this panel. Thank you to everyone involved in planning this, Lisa, especially. We are currently both co-chairs at the NCBA CLUSA's cooperative to cooperative council. And so that's just a way that I've brought in my connection here to this space. But I've been in cooperatives, or at least a financial cooperative, credit unions. My career has been kind of tenured almost 14 years. But the thing that I think when Kathy was mentioning the different ways that education kind of falls in there and like where it doesn't work and does work, I didn't realize like the difference between a bank, in our case, a bank or a credit union or cooperative, financial cooperative, till much later in my career. And I think that's just a testament of why education and information and actually like thinking through what those things, different ways that people absorb and like understand what this information or what this education, what this training means to them and how it applies onto their ongoing journeys. So like I mentioned, 14 years ago, I started working at a credit union in the Pacific Northwest. Personally, I've had not a lot of connections with co-ops, honestly. Grew up as a military brat, traveled around the world all over the place, but have certainly heard of the term co-op. Pacific Northwest, REI is on the call. Nate, shout out to you. Knew about co-ops in that frame of a sense, many grocer co-ops and other agricultural co-ops that I knew that I would like frequent, especially as I got older and realized the difference that those things were, but didn't realize that the credit unions were kind of part of that movement, part of that network. And so started my career in credit unions 14 years ago. And funny enough, I was like in charge of learning and development at our organization. And so education to me was really important. Everything that you mentioned, Kathy, you put it to a lens of like how to make sure that our employees knew how to take care of our memberships and our communities in the best way possible. And in what ways of learning would that be useful for them in their day-to-day work? Never realizing that there is this like greater umbrella of like purpose and alignment that could be used to like further the mission of why we do what we do and how we do it. So again, education is really big for me in my history and my tenure. But when 10 years, it took 10 years into my tenure at credit unions, I got the wonderful opportunity, like happenstance, to go to a national certification that the credit unions offer, the credit union system offers, which is called the Credit Union Development Educators Certificate. This is a program run by the National Credit Union Foundation, and it's a 5-day immersive everything credit unions, everything cooperative, and what makes us different, reaching back into our history and our legacy, learning about specifically the cooperative values and principles that like lead us and why we do the work we do. And in the end, I mentioned immersive, going out into the community and seeing these principles in action. And they do host that in Madison, Wisconsin. I know we keep getting all these parallel connections here because I know co-op world is kind of small, but to be in that place, I continue to call it the catalyst of the transformation, the education that I received, because not only was information and training, it was this experience that I received to really dive deep and experience myself the learnings that could happen within with the cooperative principles. And so that was in 2019. And since then, just was really inspired. And I love that, Kathy, you mentioned like education can sometimes inspire you and take you to all sorts of places and different experiences. Since then, just globbed on to the fact that there was this principle 5, that education training was something that we held as a value and a principle for us. And not only did that like self-learning and like learning journey myself, but continue to share what I was learning with others at my credit union. Thankfully, I was in a role where I could like perpetuate a lot of that onwards, and we called it cascading communications down to make sure that we were touching everyone that we could, but wanting to think about how we provided education differently and more experientially, because that truly is where some of that transformation comes. So all of that continued to happen 2019. And as you know, like the world changed in 2020. And that's where good like pluses and negatives, we had the opportunity to like be hunkered down a little bit at home and um but still had so many more avenues for connection internationally across the country through like Zoom webinars, meetings like this. And so that's where a lot of like informational sharing happened. And the trainings that were done well with groups like the African American Credit Union Coalition and other groups and other associations that were continuing to perpetuate education, training, and learning for different groups um, was quite successful and continue to do that. Once the world started to open up again, it was actually this past year, 2023, I got another wonderful opportunity to continue to see the breadth of the movement for credit unions itself. And there was in the credit union movement, there's a USDE program, which I just explained I did in 2019. There are also other systems that offer their own similar type of development education programs. So there's one for Africa, one for the Caribbean, one in Europe, one in Asia, or maybe two in Asia, and the opportunity to earn an international designation as a credit union development educator is by going through this process of attending a different geographics program. And I got the honor of this past year going to Canada's DE program, which was put on by St. Mary's. I know Kathy mentioned them, gave a shout out to them earlier and their work with the ICA. But that particular program, I honestly was a little bit sad because I was like, oh man, I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to learn from like this totally different place that I'm not familiar with and like be immersed in that. But the Canada program that I attended was so great. Like I I was not looking forward to it, right? And but coming into it and now experiencing it, I think I'm that much more better off because it was for me a really great combination of that highly academic, like informational transfer that happens, and but also the education experiential where we got to like see these principles in action. And Canada DE doesn't focus just on credit unions as part of as like their, I guess, their foci. They looked at the ecosystem as a whole of all co-ops that could be present within a community and how we could leverage each other a little bit differently. Taking in another principle, P6, around cooperation among cooperatives, and how if we create an ecosystem with all of us different sectors, what could that mean for changing the communities we're in or changing the world? I love that image you showed, Kathy, with the like helping pull forward civilization, right? So all that to say, there is for me this constant thirst for knowledge, thirst for connection with others in different sectors and industries, but within the cooperative space, because we continue to realize there is so much to learn from each other. I'm currently working, my title is a program director. It's recently changed to community impact director. And we're realizing that the space for cooperatives, especially on a tiny island of Kauai, there's opportunities to leverage this ecosystem we could create with different co-ops, but also the nonprofit sector, also the public sector. And by hooing, we call it hooing, coming all together, we have this opportunity to amplify and build our capacity and share and learn from each other. So there's opportunities here to solve true problems that we face on Kauai, like issues with housing, issues with climate change, and how do we kind of bring the people that are doing this work together and do that cooperatively has been such a great learning. And we're going to solve, like it's not even, we're going to solve many development issues that are facing our island and hoping to share that worldwide because our learnings can be, obviously something that could be useful across the world. So that's a little bit of background for me. Kathy, hope that's what you're looking for. Thank you all for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hazel. We're going to transition to Megan. And Megan, I'll just advance your slides, I think, when you're ready, if that's all right.
That sounds perfect. Thank you, Kathy.
Awesome. You bet.
I have been addicted to cooperatives for, I would say, about 20 years. I do think it's an addiction because once you get it, you just kind of stay in it and you get very excited. So I'm a very visual person, so I have some slides to kind of show my deep love. Nate, I'm a member of REI, and I have been for a very long time. I'm a member of my community credit union. My daughter went to co-op preschool. I worked at an electric cooperative when I first got into the space and realized how cool co-ops are. And then I worked at the National Association for Electric Cooperatives, and I now work for a communications cooperative. So I eat as much cooperation as I can. I really do. We have to keep Blue Diamond in the house, or else I get upset. Because it's such a powerful force for good in our communities. So I get excited, and it is co-op month, which is my favorite month of the year. My daughter was born in October, and everyone gave me a look like, did you plan that? No, but it was a happy coincidence that I have a co-op baby. So big fan, basically, which Kathy knows. So it's a treat to be here with y'all. I'm fangirling over Hazel May and Nate just a little bit, so don't mind me. But I took the approach of sharing what a lot of different cooperatives that are members of Pioneer, what they are doing, and then what our communications co-op is doing. So I figured I would just show y'all a couple examples, going from just straight up information to training, and then really making those connections through education. So the first one that I wanted to show you is basically something fun that we're doing to try to connect with our members. We have a Content in the Wild contest. I don't know if y'all have ever thought about doing that, but these are all pictures of our members. We send them an $50 REI gift card when we pick their picture. Told you I'm a fan, Nate. But they send in pictures of something that they created with us. And it's a way to celebrate how what our cooperative does help support their story. And it has helped us create a community of people that call themselves utility pioneers. That's what we call our membership. So diving into our examples from our membership and folks that we get to partner with, if you're talking about straight up information, one of the first examples I thought of was the Power Pup. And these, you'll see an example of each of these as we go through information, training, and education. But the first thing I wanted to share was Power Pup in Florida. And Kathy, there's this adorable picture of this pup who was lost. My friend Christy at the co-op found a wet dog outside their drive-thru. They have a credit union, of course. Everybody should. And found this wet dog. And Kathy, if you could show the picture of the Power Pup. Oh, I forgot I added this. Sorry, guys. I get excited. No, Kathy, go back. Go back. Yes. This is the difference between information and education. Information, inspect your ducks, which is something everyone should do, no matter how you spell ducks. Because fowl are a little finicky too sometimes. But then this, it's a TVA is the Tennessee Valley Authority. They help produce power or generate power. And then they changed their advertising to focus more on education. You shouldn't have to sleep with the soy sauce. It's connecting with the why instead of just saying what people should be doing. So I threw that in because it's just fun to think about it a little bit differently. They're both principle 5, but one of them is a little more powerful than the other. All right, now Power Pup. Let's see if we get it, Kathy. I'm excited. All right, this is the Power Pup. He is adorable, right? And I'll tell you, at first, they focused on the information. She finds this dog and they share this post about it. Can you find my family? I found my way to the co-op into rain a few hours ago and haven't found my way back home. Please share so my parents can come pick me up, right? So that's just like basic information. And spoiler, the owner was reunited with the dog. That is information. And we share information like this all the time. And it's not necessarily about, how the co-op was founded, but it's just information from our co-op to the community. But what I love is that Christy took the story a little bit further, and she decided to make this an opportunity to educate people about the difference the co-op makes in the community. So if you see on the next one, Kathy, I'm so used to doing my own slides. I always have a ton of them. She did reels of this puppy going all over the co-op, meeting everybody in the different areas. She had this dog for like a full day, and they gave the dog a bath. The dog went out on the docks, had a huge photo shoot. It was amazing. And they followed it up after the dog was reunited So many people were sharing the story, getting excited about this story in their small, rural Florida community, that they decided to make a partnership with the Suwannee County Animal Shelter. And now they have Power Pups and Power Pals, and they do adoptions in the community and help get the word out. And for me, that's more of the education. It's showing the heart of the cooperative and the role that the cooperative has in the community, plus its puppies happily touring a co-op. Anytime you can have a dog in your tour your facility, it's a win for me. I don't know. That's just me. Also, I really want a dog and we can't have one. So the next example I wanted to share, just thinking about twisting the way that you're using information, training, and education a little bit more. The next one is really training, putting people in the driver's seat. Literally, the folks at Oklahoma Electric Cooperative have a series of videos where they don't talk about the basic information. They have the information if you want to know about rebates or whatnot, but they have a series of videos. One just about how can you mom in an EV, like how many car seats fit in, which car seats fit. It's like a whole thing. How many cup holders are there, which maybe is not a big deal to you, but it could be a big deal to somebody else. They even had the tallest guy that worked at the co-op get in, and Autumn is the host. She's the shortest person that works at the co-op, and showed them both driving and talking about the basics of it. And it was really a fun way to show and put you, whoever you are, put you behind the driver's seat to experience something that they were trying to encourage their membership to do. Now, a lot of the folks listening on this webinar, maybe you're not going to have an EV program. Our members are telcos and electric cooperatives. So I work with utilities, right? But I bet there's another way that you can put your members in the driver's seat and put them into experiences that you're trying to train them on to really help connect in a fun way. I also wanted to share another fun example. I get excited about examples, as Kathy knows. The next one that we were going to show you, maybe. Yes, is from our friends Nopalco. So they're pretty close to REI's headquarters. I know not where you are, Nate, but they're up just off the coast of Seattle, in the San Juan Islands. And they do their due diligence with the facts. And I think this is a good way to show that you can have all of these different elements. You can do information, and there's a place for that, right? So they have the facts about electric vehicles, which is a really big push for them right now. They've got their savings calculators. They have different models that you can compare. You can calculate your emissions, figure out chargers, all of that stuff, right? And a lot of people have that on their websites. They then took that a step farther. And so I also want to show you how they do their training. They have a dog. There might be a theme. Don't judge me for wanting a dog. They have a dog named Pepper. And Kathy, if you can show folks Pepper, I think they will understand why people love Pepper. They have these stories of Pepper going around the community in an EV, and they have road trips. And Pepper goes on these road trips. But that really is training folks. They put out maps to show where they're trying to drive. What's feasible? What can we do? And then Pepper goes on adventures. And they've been doing this for like 2 years. It is so much fun to watch them. So that is, we talked about having the training, having the information training, but then they took it one step further, which I loved, Kathy, what you said earlier about experiential marketing, I think, or storytelling. They have an EV jamboree. And I've got a couple of pictures of that. The whole point of people trying to do EVs is to find different ways to power their community with renewable resources, right? And so they have this huge EV jamboree every year, and they invite everyone to come out there since they're trying to convince folks to switch to EVs. They call it the Island Way. They have these huge earth balls that the kids play with. They have all the different styles of EVs. They work with folks, the dealers in their communities, so that people can kind of see what they're getting into. And it's a huge community celebration about why they're doing EVs in the first place. So it's a really cool to watch. And that, I think, is where you make the connection. That's the event. That's really getting into it. And people love going to the EV Jamboree. Maybe, again, that's not what you're going to throw, but I would encourage you to think about ways to make education an experience for your membership. So the next, that's Opalco. If you are not following them already and want to see the adventures of Pepper, I highly encourage you to do so. And since we have Hazel May with us, I wanted to give a shout out to our members at Kauai Island Utility Cooperative. I love the team over there. Beth and Shelley are very good friends of mine. I went on my honeymoon there. And they took me on a tour of their hydropower facility, which my husband was like, really? And I said, buckle up. This is life with me. So we got excited. But they have a big program that they're working on now. They have had amazing results with bringing renewable power and projects to the island, right? And they're only 20 years old. They're not like the story of Kauai Island Utility Cooperative is amazing. Hazel, I'm jealous that you get to work with them in the community all the time because I love them. And they have general information. This is what we're doing. They have a big project and they have the information about that, which I think is an important part to make sure people know what's happening. But then they take it a step further. And let's see if we can take it a step further. Yes, we're moving together. And they use the magazine that we help produce for them, Currents. They kind of dive into what's happening, not just the basic information, but they're actually showing how they're doing things, right? They're doing the training for it. They have, I love a good graphic. Again, I'm a visual communicator. So they've got the graphics. They have a great video that shows the entire process, how this project is going to work. So look at ways to go deeper into your storytelling. I think these are just really great examples of that. And then they did something pretty darn cool that I found on their website. And I thought, of course they did. If you go to the next slide, they track all of their community and public outreach. So they are going out into the community, and I'm a little jealous that I didn't think of doing this. They have it by date, location, the audience that was engaged, the type of outreach they're doing. They describe what they did in that area, any concerns, questions that came from the membership, and the response that the utility gave. I love this. I think, again, getting out in your community, you know, as Nate's going to tell us in a minute all about getting outside, I think storytelling needs to get outside as well, because it's important to get out there into the community. And I don't want to take up all of Nate's time. I could talk all day about this stuff. So it's a little hard if I don't have control over but if we can just go through the next couple of slides and I'll just briefly mention what they are. Here's an example of an annual report, all visual information. It's nice. It's a good way to get information across, basically. The next slide we'll show you is going to be our annual report. This is our co-op member credits mailing. And we just wanted to say, this is what's going on. This is how much money you're getting. And it tells our story, but briefly, it's not a huge thing. We just want folks to know what's happening. And I think information works there. The next one is where we go more in depth with it. This is our annual report on our website, and we have videos from our members talking about the way that they work with our co-op. And then last but not least, we have case studies, training people on how we do things. The next one is our podcasts, which I'm one of the hosts. If you want to hear what we're doing, we talk a lot about stories. So we're always interviewing people to figure out why they do things. So it's not just case studies. We go deeper, we interview, and we get people excited. This was me last week in Las Vegas with Mary Miller at a telco in South Carolina. How do you do what you do? And we take this a step further with our Story Connect Story Connect conference, which is a storytelling conference that we hold once a year. And that's I think the last two slides I have are just the Story Connect conference, where we have people from other types of cooperatives come in and really inspire our members. Why is being a cooperative important? Why is what we do matters, right? And really dive into things. You'll see the last slide I had was about Nate's co-op, right? We had our highest rated session was on REI. So it's not people from our industry necessarily, it's people that will inspire folks, stories that inspire and get back to why we do what we do. I'm done now, Kathy. I get excited.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. Wow. Those are such great photos. And I think from both of those presentations, Hazel and Megan, just, how powerful story is. And right, it's one of the oldest ways that we've ever communicated. And it's still the way, today that we bring the cooperatives to life. And I think really gets at the why, like you said. So we were excited to turn now to Nate. One more, it's right. Podcasts, amazing. And share a little bit, Nate, from your perspective with REI. Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. I am Nate. Thank you all for joining today and hearing more about the educational and training pieces that exist as one of the pillars of co-ops. As noted, I work for REI. For those that are unaware, REI is Recreational Equipment Incorporated, founded in 1938 by a group of 23 climbers who wanted better climbing equipment than what they could find in the United States. So gathered the resources, sent somebody over to Switzerland to buy all the ice axes, brought them all back, and then shared that with their community. So that was the start of the recreation co-op that I now work for, which now has over 10,000 employees, 150 plus locations nationwide, as well as all of the online presence that one would expect in these days. My personal story with REI started in 2007. I was living in Alaska. This is a much younger me in the picture, just outside of Anchorage, as I had started working with the company. Like most folks that moved to Alaska, I was there doing one of three things. I either transferred with the military, I moved up because I was hoping to find mineral riches, or I was chasing a future partner. Mine was the last one. Went up to Alaska for a few years, started working with REI there, and I've been with the company ever since. So I'm now in my 16th year working with the company. One of the things I've really appreciated working for REI, having worked at other retail establishments, is the value that gets put into the training and education opportunities, both as an employee as well as what we offer to customers. I think what makes REI stand out to folks, I think one of the reasons that REI has been so successful over the years is uh, often comes down to just shining moments. Um, and what that may look like. I'll go off my personal bias. I manage the footwear department here at our store. The way that you're going to have a conversation with somebody about a hiking boot that you're going to go on a trip about here is different than a lot of the other options that will exist out there in the world. There is more interest to make sure that we are informing our customers of what is appropriate, both for what they need, for the areas that they're been going, and in many cases have folks that are working who have had that direct experience. They can tell you what that trail is like at the Grand Canyon. They've hiked it multiple times. And being able to relay that sort of simple process or those simple stories as part of our process is inherent to the work that we do. We of course moved beyond that. REI has an extensive outdoor and educational education program. Those are as simple as classes that we run in the store where we teach folks how to replace their flat tires on their bikes, or for folks that are going out in the wild and doing day trips kayaking or doing multi-day backpacking trips with a guide. All things that REI has part of our platform to make sure that we're getting the population as a whole the opportunity to learn about the things that we think are great. We think, getting out into the wild is important. We think it's essential for everybody to have, that option and that opportunity, and uh, working to make those special moments for folks, whether it's in our stores or outside of our stores, is where I see a lot of differentiation. Um, I have a personal story new today that I'm going to relay to sort of wrap up my time and it comes down to the education and training that's provided to our employees. Um, as I noted, prior to working with REI, I had worked in other retail establishments. I had worked in other um, outdoor education or outdoor recreation retail establishments. And this morning I had the opportunity to share my knowledge of downhill skiing with a bunch of our new employees. We did a 3-hour training on boot fitting. For those who are really nerdy about alpine skiing or downhill skiing, 3 hours seems like a lot of time. That scratches the surface. That is a rabbit hole that you will never find the basement of. But got to take the time to take that time with folks who are learning this. Some of these folks have been selling alpine gear for years, and having the opportunity to engage and train and ask those questions and have them ready to go to have that same conversation with somebody who's coming in and is hoping to spend hundreds of dollars with us, and how we can make that as frictionless conversation as possible, is through training and education. There is a lot of value that comes into staying relevant, and staying engaged with the outdoor community by being able to continuously update and educate our employees, so that they're able to do the same, reaching out to our members and other customers. It's really important that we maintain and we keep those opportunities, so that we can spend 3 hours talking about boot fit training, whereas at other establishments, maybe 30 minutes prior to winging it on the floor is the experience that I had. And I'm really happy to work for a company and share an experience where education and training, both for myself, my employees, and my customers, is one of the things that we held up as important. Thank you all for spending time with me today. I'm glad I was able to
Fantastic.
join in.
Thank you, Nate. It's so good to have you. I have to share too. I saw lots of REI love in the chat as you were talking, and want to just share too. I'm on a couple of different kind of Facebook groups related to outdoor activities, and it feels like every fifth message, someone is saying, "Oh, if you have a question about gear, go to REI. Go to REI Co-op." Because the folks there really take the time and really, as you say, kind of have that intrinsic motivation themselves to get out and enjoy and feel deeply, why we don't just want to sell you a great pair of shoes. We want to make sure that they fit. Right. So to me, that's like the training part in a way, right? If you want to think about it that way. And then, but I'm going to share my own love for the outdoors with you and hopefully really inspire and motivate you to have an appreciation for why we are out there, right? And how we are taking care of the environment, being stewards of the environment. There's so many great programs within REI that are doing that and that are bringing that awareness to new audiences all the time. I've seen a lot of effort in recent REI materials that are really looking at who REI is reaching out to and how to bring more folks into the enjoyment of the outdoors and not have it be, sort of this realm of like, well, only if you can afford expensive equipment or whatever, right? Like it should be for everyone, and there's a space for us all to appreciate the outdoors and nature, and in doing so get maybe closer to ourselves too, right? And to be thinking about the things that are important to us and then extend that to all of the other parts of our lives, right? So it's such a great kind of holistic way to think about what could just be an outdoor products store, right? And it's something much more. Just as all of the examples that have been shared tonight are great, sort of they're walking the talk, right, of how we're doing something different for people, real people who have real needs and hopes and aspirations, and we're not only maybe meeting sort of a short-term need, but we're also helping them come to some transformed space, right? Whether right, that's the ability to see their neighbors as fellow people on this planet together, that are moving toward the goals that we all share, whether it's the opportunity to have a greater appreciation for what's going on internationally. I think the DE program, Hazel, is such an interesting one, and such a robust and well organized program. Everyone I know that's gone through the DE program just raves about it, and I'm so glad you got a chance to experience the Canadian one, right? And then, as you said, Megan, that I love this story about the dog. Just the idea of something greater could come from what otherwise might have been just sort of a one-off, right, outreach to folks on a kind of mundane but heartfelt circumstance. And I think those are all ways that we in the co-op space look at opportunities to do more, right? That it's not just the facts and figures, it's helping people to do and be, and then helping them to change themselves and the world that they live in for the better. So we've got, I think, a little bit of time. I want to just check in with the chat, and let's see what we've got here. I do see a note from Suzette Snow Cobb. Nice to hear you, Suzette. Hear you here on the webinar. Before I go to Suzette's question, I have to just say I was mortified to realize as I was going through the first few slides that inexplicably I wrote and said International Cooperative Association. I have no idea where that came from. It's the International Cooperative Alliance. All of my fellow long-term co-opers out there are like, sorry about that. I don't know what was in my head when I was typing up that slide and that I didn't catch it when I reviewed it. International Cooperative Alliance, ICA. Just needed to make that little, forgive me. Okay, so Suzette says, Nate, I love that REI has co-op in their logo now. They didn't for a while, right? That's my interjection there. And so so she goes on to ask, does REI's identity as a co-op translate into staff training? Is it part of training and education? Can you talk a little bit about, Nate, about how folks on the floor are prepared to talk about the fact that REI is a co-op?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. I haven't spent time in our employee onboarding in a while, but the co-op structure and the broad retail co-op that we have is a little unique. The fact that anybody can walk into our store, sign up to become a member and become a co-op member, creates an interesting experience relative to other co-ops that folks are aware of. Speaking to some of my co-op friends across the border in Wisconsin, there's only so many dairy farmers that are possible to exist. You can only have that many in the dairy co-op, and that's so that's going to limit that to a certain degree, whereas with REI, and there's lots of opportunity for folks to come in. So the way that a co-op is handled when you're talking about 600 members is very different than the way that it's handled when you're talking about 6 million members, and so the nature of that and how the co-op developed and the story that kind of went along with that are all part of the employee onboarding experience, and all part of our sales training experience as well. So the element that I think that folks who shop with us occasionally are aware of is that co-op members get a return back on the purchases that they make at the store, but the bigger thing that we can talk to when we're talking about our action in the community and things along those lines are also part of what that co-op structure allows us to do. Real sort of quick side note on to that end, but as an example, earlier it was talked about adding a possible eighth pillar around ready work, which is something that REI is working on as part of the work that we're doing internally. Something that we're dealing with. One of the unique things about the Twin Cities areas, which is where I'm located here just south of Minneapolis, is we have the largest percentage of Somali immigrants in the country. So when the the war in Somalia happened, and immigrants fled. They all fled to the cold north for reasons I do not understand. But large collection of them here, and a big part of their culture is getting outside and doing things. And one of the things that I work on is communicating with that group broadly to try to make sense where REI can make sense for them. So one of the things we were able to do to that end is work with an upstart company locally called Calsoni. Calsoni is run by a woman named Muna. Muna has put together activewear for women who are looking to maintain their modest, attire. So it's activewear that you can go out and play basketball in, but still have full body coverage. Important for them of the Muslim faith. Important for them as far as actively trying to get out and get into the the outdoors, and especially the elements that we have in a very hard for season kind of climate here in Minnesota. So one of the ways that we're able to educate and train is through those connections with other community groups, co-op and not, that allows us to do that outreach and create those conversations, those stories for the other folks who come in and see the Calsoni stuff and have the questions. Hey, what is this? It's something that we're able to activate on that a lot of other that allows us to differentiate in some way and be very locally important to the store. And that same kind of story is something that my coworkers nationwide can take advantage of for the groups that are in their area, which also spend a lot of time outside and the don't necessarily fit the classic mold of the outdoors person.
Thank you, Nate. I can't believe it. We're already over time. This has been so many great examples and great stories. I know there were probably a couple of other things in the chat. I know Rebecca raised a question around unionization and co-ops. And while it's a little outside the realm of the education topic for tonight, it is something that is, of interest with a number of co-ops around the country. And folks are looking at this issue and having conversations about this. And I encourage folks to kind of connect with their local cooperative communities to find out more. There was a symposium in October about that. It's a big conversation, and I hope one that people will meet and talk together and learn more about. It's part of, I guess, in writ large, the educational opportunity we have, right, in cooperative spaces to think about big questions, right, to address them in ways that are, that are fair and just, and bring people to conversations, in ways that are constructive. And in any opportunity in your cooperative to bring the education space, whether it's in sort of like everything from, like I said, the mundane to, maybe things that are a little bit more challenging, harder for us to answer, and that might have different responses depending on the co-op and the environment that it's in. These are all, this is a whole array of ways that cooperatives can really engage, again, with their members, with their staff, with the general public, right? And to really be thinking deeply about how they can meet. And it's a big job, right? Like, grocery stores don't have to stop and explain their business model, right? A conventional grocery store doesn't have to take the time to tell you what their ownership model is while they're selling you, cornflakes. But we have a higher call, if you will, in the cooperative space. And one of the ways that we can set a good stage for that is by, having really good open conversation, being in very good constant communication with our membership, figuring out ways to meet them where they are and to bring them along into these other conversations in ways that are, really educational. And so thank you for that. Thank you, all of our panelists. Thank you, National Farmers Union, for hosting. We're so thrilled to be able to share this during October Co-op Month, and we invite you as you go back to your cooperative spaces to think more deeply about education, what that principle really means, and how you can bring it to life in your cooperatives and credit unions. Thanks again, and have a great day.